Good morning. I'm Janelle Versnick, and I'm the SHRUG president.
I'm Alex Carrier, and I'm the secretary for SHRUG.
Welcome to the 2020 Virtual SHRUG Workshop.
We would like to take a second to thank our sponsors, Esri, Tallahassee-Leon County GIS, and Pandas Consulting.
We have a lot of great presentations over the next 2 days. This is our first virtual webinar, and we are excited for you to be a part of SHRUG history, but please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties.
We will be recording all sessions, and they will be available after the conference ends. You can find the full agenda on the SHRUG website at shrug-gis.org.
And now we would like to introduce the SHRUG keynote, Steve Padgett Vasquez from Planet. He has spent the last 10 years helping stakeholders and clients maximize the value of Earth-observing data in their decision-making. He will be speaking about remote sensing and his time at NASA. And please welcome Steve.
Good morning, everybody, and I just have to say, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so thrilled to talk to everyone here, and I just have to say, one of the reasons why I enjoy these kinds of opportunities, it's because as you saw with the slides, the GIS, the remote sensing community, it's a very collaborative environment. It's always very welcoming, a lot of sharing of knowledge, of resources, of time. And I just love being in this sort of group environment. And I'm also kind of thrilled to be involved in the first virtual workshop as well. I'll make sure that it's also not my last time that I'm involved with SHRUG, especially since Tallahassee, Thomasville, that area of the U.S., Southeast, is very, very special to my heart. So I figured I'd get started, and I pretty much loosely labeled this talk "How I Stumbled into My Geospatial Career," because I was never the kid who knew from age 10 or so, hey, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. I never even said hey, I want to be a GIS analyst when I grow up. I didn't even know what GIS was until, honestly, I was a graduate student. And but once I discovered it, there was really no turning back. But I cautioned to saying I had no idea. I had no clear career path. Here I am, in my mid-30s, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I just want to share with you my journey, the resources that I've come across, and hopefully somehow how these resources can be of great value to your organizations or to your individual career path or educational goals as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can. I currently don't have the option to share my screen. So bear with me. Perfect. Thank you. Cool. It's loading. Perfect. Can I get a quick confirmation that you can see my my slide?
We can see everything, Steve.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So just a quick, outline of my talk, just a short biography, where I came from, how I got accidentally introduced to GIS and remote sensing, and then talk about what I did with my 10 years at NASA Develop, and at the same time highlighting some interesting things that about my PhD research, and then finally where I am right now, talking about my role at Planet, and more importantly what it is that Planet, how Planet falls into the GIS and the remote sensing community. So briefly, I'm originally from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and I lived there till I was about, I want to say 19. Then I spent some time in Nicaragua for my freshman year. These are my parents. It's interesting, growing up in Honduras, that's all I knew was the world around me and stuff. I've heard about NASA. I really had no idea about satellites and so on. And little did I know that eventually I was going to be so involved within this community. So I was actually born in Managua, but I didn't spend much time there when I was a baby. Like just political climate wasn't that inviting. But I did, once things settled down, go back and spend my freshman year at a university down there. And that was prior to eventually landing a scholarship out of Thomasville, Georgia, at Thomas University. And eventually also, started my master's program at University of Alabama at Birmingham. I had no idea like what major I wanted to be. I ended up with biology only because I took biology the first semester and then chemistry, and I noticed a lot of my classmates struggle with it. And it's not that like I fell in love with it, but I figured, hey, it comes a little bit natural to me, so I might as well go this way. So I figured I'll just go down that path. When I first started my college education, I eventually, my ultimate goal was to be a college professor. Definitely not my goal right now, but that was definitely the path that I was on. And then my MS, my master's degree, was in biology as well. But it was in grad school that I got introduced to the notion of GIS and remote sensing through Sarah Parkak. I actually, I was bored, I had some free time, and she was giving this talk about like observing Earth from outer space, and the whole notion just like seemed so fascinating to me. I went to this 45-minute talk, and my mind was just completely blown. I'm like, oh my God, there's satellites, revolving around Earth, taking pictures of the surface, and there's all these cool things you can do with it, and I was sold. So that's how my 2-year degree ended up being my, like at that point, like the best 3 years of my life, because ultimately I changed course of like what I wanted to research. I wanted to incorporate remote sensing into my own research, and ended up like kind of looking at some vegetation analysis and watershed studies paired with some like fish and macroinvertebrate data that the biology department had recorded. And it was actually through Sarah that I also got introduced to NASA Develop, and which I knew like I felt like my skills were very basic, and I wanted an internship that would help me provide more hands-on experience of handling the data. I was kind of torn between like following the internship route or continuing my graduate studies for a PhD, and I wasn't sure what to do, so I kind of like applied to both. I was very surprised that I actually got accepted to the NASA Develop program, which at that time was actually based out of Sarah's lab at UAB. So that was back in 2010, and ultimately I was officially with NASA Develop till actually earlier this year, and those 10 years was just amazing. So I figured I would take this time and talk a little bit about the program, because I think it's an amazing program that could benefit both anybody who's interested in internships, undergrads, as graduate students, or honestly anybody who's also like thinking about changing their careers and may want to have some hands-on experience with the data. It's also a great resource for any organization that uses geospatial data, as you'll learn shortly, because this program is all geared towards building capacity and ensuring that there's a lot of usage out of the data that NASA ultimately collects that's also freely available. In some ways, you can say that there's a lot of taxpayers' money that gets invested into these Earth observing satellites, and ultimately, like one of our goals is to make sure that the stakeholders, which is so much the taxpayers, along with actually with the rest of the world, to benefit and use this for their own decision making and for their own studies, and ensure that it's a wise investment. So with that, I'll start off with a quick overview of the program. As you may or may not know, and this number keeps fluctuating a lot, NASA Earth observation actually includes 18 polar observing satellites. There's actually 4 instruments that are also involved or included within the International Space Station. And a lot of this data is easily, well, maybe not as easily available, but it's definitely freely available, and for almost anybody to use. So I kind of talked around about Develop, but let's get into what Develop actually is. It's a dual capacity program in the sense that it builds, training, it creates kind of like hands-on experience so much for the partners and the participants. So it's a way to engage communities and our interns, which, like I said, may or may not be students, but essentially kind of like bridging that gap between NASA Earth science and society. And in doing so, kind of like give our state, our partner organizations or our end users the tools needed to make sure that they can do their jobs more efficiently, or actually more informed with the data collected. So where does NASA fit more or less within the whole different structure? It's a capacity building program, and that falls under the applied sciences. I don't know about you, but like when like my first notion of NASA is always about space exploration, like sending shuttles, the International Space Stations. And I never realized like there's also a big component that has to do with like, the Earth Science Division. And that's been built in its charter, even, from its foundation. So what's interesting about the NASA Applied Sciences program is that it kind of divides into these different core areas of kind of like essentially needs or project focus, so much as agriculture and food security, urban development, disasters, ecological forecasting, energy, health and air quality, transportation infrastructure, and water resources. And the developed projects pretty much cover, like at one time, like one or two of these topics at a time. So who participates in develop? It's, like I said, normally recent grads or actual or even students who are currently working on their undergrad, military personnel, transitioning professionals, and we work with decision makers. This can be at the state and local level, federal agencies, NGOs, and this also applies to internationally as well. The benefits, as listed in the slide, is like they enhance decision support throughout the use of NASA Earth observations and to increase the exposure of these technologies and capabilities. True benefit is also the personal and technical development of those involved within the program. So normally we have about 350 plus participants throughout the year. We average about 80 projects, and we kind of like highlight the application, the capability of NASA Earth observations. We address community concerns. We work with different organizations who could benefit from using this NASA Earth observations, and we also have to make sure that like that those needs kind of like align with one of the NASA Applied Sciences programs national application areas. And also we do a lot of effort to incorporate teams with diverse academic backgrounds. So not everybody who's participates has to be like a geography major, because part of the program is that training or that exposure to this data set. So we can also hope that we can attract some students with different backgrounds, because it can also lend a very unique lens in helping solve an issue, and hopefully motivate them to explore how they can incorporate this sort of technology into their own educational research or even their own career path. So in terms of like science advisors and project collaborators, like if you have an idea, I'll share an email towards the end, like feel free to share it, and we can easily try to create a project around it, or see how we can try to work that out into the schedule. At the same time, if you have like an earth science expertise and you also have a project, like not only can you like help kind of direct this project, but at the same time serve as an advisor for the project at hand. So where is NASA located? We're located at 5 different NASA centers and 7 regional locations. These might vary a little bit, but the closest one to Tallahassee or the Southeast region is, we have a node based out of the University of Georgia, one in Huntsville, Alabama, and one in Mobile. So at the same time, now that everything's going virtual, those students who are interested can also participate in different nodes, or try to identify a specific project that you would like to be involved in, and then make your decision on what node to apply based on what projects are available. Within, I do have to mention, like within my claim to fame within Develop was that I was able to transfer the lab that we had under Sar Parkhak's lab at UAB to Huntsville so we could be closer to our NASA advisors. And then once I spent 2 years within Develop, I decided to go for a PhD, but I love the program so much that I didn't want to leave it. So somehow, I don't know how it happened. I think it was a little bit of luck, but like I was able to convince my science, I guess my PhD advisor to like help host a new Develop node at UGA. And I also was able to sell that idea to the National Program Office of Develop. And that node actually got established back in 2013. And they've been creating amazing projects ever since. So what makes a successful developer? You know, like just like I mentioned briefly, like I love the GIS remote sensing because it's a very collaborative environment. We're looking always for people who are willing to collaborate. Those involved, you know, who have a passion for service, who are very passionate about the research and the work that they do, and more importantly, people who are curious. You know, like we take in participants who have varying degrees of expertise. You don't have to be, you know, like an amazing Python coder to, you know, to guarantee a slot. Like you can have very basic intro skills, or simply just a curiosity about GIS to apply, and we will not hold that against you. If anything, we want to make sure that our teams are diverse as possible. So each project is normally divided around 10 weeks at a time. They tend to coincide with kind of like the spring, summer, and fall term. At the end of those 10 weeks, you know, each project has a project summary, a technical report, a poster, presentations, and at the same time, like we create a video, which you can find on YouTube, and they're 3-minute videos, and they're actually made by the students, and honestly, they're amazing. And I'll make sure, let's see if I can add it to the chat. I'll share a couple of videos in the chat. If not, I'll follow up with an email afterwards as well, because they're definitely worth watching. And also, it's also a great way to, if you're interested in like trying to create a project, suggest a project, you can do so. Kind of get ideas from existing videos and see how like they've been applied. I know we've done several in Florida, particularly with the Everglades, something more along the lines of like urban development, at the same time with ecological forecasting. So, you know, if there's projects already existed and you think you could be applied to like your particular area, well, you know, like we can look into like sharing that methodology to make sure like maybe kind of like as a part of sharing that knowledge. So who's eligible to participate? Anybody who's over 18 with a minimum GPA of 3.0. Like I said, current students, former students, you know, career professionals, veterans. You know, the majority of the students who participate come from STEMs, but by no means does that mean that you have to come from that sort of background. If you're applying to a NASA center, you do have to be a U.S. citizen. The regional offices do, some of them do have the access to take foreign nationals. So these are like students who are visiting here on a student visa, like I was when I first started the program. So there's so many nodes, so many different interest areas that it's really flexible and open to a large part of the student community. So here's just highlighting some of the, you know, common majors where students come from and some of the common software programming languages. And to be honest, when I started, I had very limited GIS skills and definitely had no coding skills at that point. So don't necessarily be hesitant to apply based on that. Something to also highlight is that you know, these are paid positions as well. And as you can see, like the spring term application window has already closed, but if you're interested for something in the summer, that's going to run from June 7th through August 13th, and normally the window to apply is going to be probably around January 18th to the last week of February. So you definitely have some time. However, if you're interested in like kind of like trying to, you know, give an idea as to potential collaboration or try to establish a project, you know, we can start develop and start having those conversations a lot earlier. You don't have to have a project set in order to apply. So just keep that in mind. This is just a quick overview of like what the 2018 summer portfolio looked like. As you can see, for that particular year, there was a lot of water projects and a lot of ecological forecasting. These values change. Sometimes develop might have like a particular focus on a particular given year, but that doesn't mean that we're going to do it at the expense of ignoring all the other different application areas. And here we can see the total like partners by type. And as you can see, like we do have state and local governments. We also have federal agencies, but we all sometimes work with a federal agency like at a local level or that serves a very specific regional area. So you can also find more information on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter. Like I said, YouTube is a great way to look at the different videos that Develop has put out there, and along with Instagram. Here's the general here's the general email for like questions and so on. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to provide my email in case you want to like carry this conversation offline, or you simply have like a couple of questions before you either want to submit a project idea or you want to apply to the project yourself. So like I mentioned, I started with Develop in 2010. At that point, like I wasn't sure if I want to do the internship or like go the PhD route. Since I was on a student visa, my my temporary work visa was running out, so I finally decided, okay, it's time to go to PhD. I didn't want to leave that that experience with Develop, so I was able to bring this UGA. And this is me with my main PhD advisor from last year once I finished my PhD. And the reason I bring up this slide is because I want to I can't emphasize enough that never underestimate the power of a cold email. With Marguerite, I was kind of like not sure like how I wanted to get involved into GIS remote sensing. So it was probably like 2009. I got on Google and I started I looked at the map, I looked what universities were more or less nearby UAB, so I could have the chance to drive over there and meet professors if needed. And I sent her a cold email saying like, hey, I see that your lab's involved with remote sensing. I see that you have an ecology background. Like, I'm interested in applying to grad school. Is there a way that you can meet with me? And to my surprise, she actually replied back and invited me to her next lab meeting. And I was able to drive up. We found a week that worked for both of us. I was able to drive up there, and honestly, like it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. And it all started with, a Google search and a cold email, and she's been such an amazing advisor, such an amazing mentor, and I can't stress enough. Like I said, if you have curiosity or interest, don't hesitate to reach out, especially if you're looking for grad schools. Don't hesitate to reach out to professors. Like the worst that can happen is they simply won't respond to your email. So keep that in mind. So I figured, I'm taking this shotgun approach to what I'm showing you, kind of like a little bit of like the research that I've been involved with. It seems to be a little bit haphazard, but ultimately, like that's what most career paths look like. That's definitely a reflection, more or less, of my life and my career interests. But at the same time, I hope that this approach kind of lends itself to be of interest to the wide, diverse attendance of this conference. So my PhD field site was actually Costa Rica. UGA at that time actually had a small campus. And, being from Honduras and being a fluent Spanish speaker, it seemed like a very easy transition, a great opportunity to like jump in there and kind of dwell and figure out what I can do with remote sensing and GIS to help certain communities, or more importantly, to help establish like a research question. So for like one of my chapters, what I ended up doing was tracking forest cover within the bellbird biological corridor in Costa Rica from 1974 to 2014. So across ultimately 40 years. For this particular chapter, like I'll just give a quick background into where the corridor is located, talk about the history of Monteverde, and very basic overview of like the methodology involved, along with the results and conclusions. So what's fascinating about the Belt-Equatorial Corridor is that it aims to pretty much kind of like merge or combine, create this like bridge of life between the Monteverde Reserve, which is this cloud forest along the Continental Divide, all the way down with the mangrove forest on the Pacific coast. It's named after this little guy, and unfortunately, I can't get the audio to work from my presentation to the webinar. So, but it sounds like someone pretty much pushing on a horn. What's interesting about Monteverde is that this community was actually founded by several Quaker families who, with their strict vow of like nonviolence, actually got some jail time for refusing to participate in the Korean War. So, they packed up their bags, they looked around, they sent out scouts to different countries, and at that time, Costa Rica had abolished their military, so they figured, hey, that sounds like an amazing spot to go ahead and set up camp. And they did. The settled community, they're still there. Some of the original founders actually are still alive. And what's surprising is that they had a very intimate relationship with the environment, and in doing so, were able to conserve like the headwaters of the watershed, which eventually became the Monteverde Reserve, and it's now one of the most, most famous cloud forests in the world. So they understood that by protecting the headwaters, they were ensuring that they had, enough water and ecosystem services for their farms and for their communities as well. What's interesting about the corridor is that they have this council that kind of like oversees it, and in a way, it's it's a council to help bring diverse stakeholders to to try to find that balance between protecting the biodiversity, connect ecosystems, and use the natural resources wisely to push for a sustainable, inclusive development, for the people involved. Like at the same time, it's Costa Rica is very tourism driven, but in this area, there's also like a lot of farmland, cattle, amazing coffee, and so on. So it's like a way to strike that balance to make sure that whatever progress they're doing is sustainable. What's so fascinating about Costa Rica is that it's always heralded as like this environmental friendly country, but what most people don't know is that actually in the 1940s and 50s, it was like at the forefront of the country with the highest deforestation rate, and that continued all the way through the 70s into the early 80s, when there was like a slow switch that eventually transitioned from depending more on agriculture to being more tourism driven. This is more or less where the corridor lies. It lies exactly between two Landsat scenes. So that kind of like made my work a little bit easier, because it's, like I was able to try to pick the better image. I had almost ultimately 2 shots to get this image, because even though I was going for my PhD, I didn't realize until I was into my research that like here I am trying to look at satellite imagery of a cloud forest and expecting not to see clouds. I should have seen that one coming, but sadly I did not. What's fascinating about the Landsat program, which is the satellite that has been collecting, or I guess constellation of satellites that's been collecting imagery, is that they have imagery for around the world since the 1970s. And here's just a list that I was able to pick imagery that was like relatively cloud free, as you can see, from like all the way from 1974 to 2014. What's interesting is that I kept my study a little bit basic, since I was relying on a lot of that older imagery. But just a quick rundown with the visible spectrum. Like these satellites collect data across the electromagnetic spectrum. Encircled in this box is what we can see are the visible portion of the spectrum. But when we extend this to include the near infrared, we realize that actually vegetation is more active, or reflects more on the near infrared. So just to summarize, like vegetation looks green to us because within the visible spectrum, green is what's reflected the most. But in reality, if we include this, wider portion of the spectrum, it would actually be near infrared. So just a quick view, like this is from within the corridor. This is just an image from Google Earth, and here's like more or less how that looks within the near infrared. The darker the red means more vegetation or thicker vegetation. And I'm just giving you some images so you can see what like the different land covers that I used. This is more like open pasture. Here's what the mangroves look like. The deep red. The advantage of using near infrared as well is that it's very easy to tease out water bodies as well. And here you can see some aquaculture fields like for tilapia and shrimp. Here you see some industrial agriculture, like unlike the other pastures, you can see like the straight lines where you can see they use a lot of heavy equipment. And this is what it looks like from, I guess from a human point of view. I use a variation of the NDVI because NDVI is great for measuring strengths, but it does saturate at the higher levels. And more or less, here's what the classifications ended up looking like. You can see like the decrease in the forest cover and then eventually picking it up. Since I use very basic land classifications, I was able to get like a very high percentage on the accuracy. If I were to redo the study, I probably wouldn't rely so much on the images from the 1970s. I would do something a lot more recent and try to get and delve more into teasing out the different kinds of forest covers. For example, like if you're looking at forest, you can try to separate it into primary or second growth. And here's just like a table view of the overview of the information. As you can see, aquaculture and the mangroves stay more or less about the same. There was an increase in agriculture, but you can see some growth in the forested areas. The benefit about able to do these land covers is that you can also do kind of like change detections. Once you have your land cover made, you can simply run a quick geo process to like see how one pixel was replaced to another. And as you can see, looking at these differences between 1974 and 2014, like this corridor has been very, very dynamic in how land cover is changing. And when we look at things more recently, within like 2010 to 2014, you can see like a lot of you can pinpoint a lot of these different areas. So just a quick summary of the conclusions. You can see increase in forest cover, 30% from covering the whole corridor to 37 in 2014. Increase in industrial agriculture from 9% to about 12%, and overall decrease in non-forested areas from 57 to 46. So this non-forested areas is the areas that eventually got reforested. And then mangroves and aquaculture remain relatively unchanged in that time. So I think for the sake of time, I'm going to skip this part, but I do want to bring it up in case there's anybody out there. Like, since this is a corridor, one thing that I wanted to look at was the use of kind of like circuit theory to try to establish like what are the key areas of interest within the corridor that need to be preserved. In essence, like if you have so many X amount of dollars to preserve an area or to create a biological corridor or bridges between different primary forests, like where would you get the most bang for the buck? So I'm gonna go ahead and skip ahead, and I do apologize for this, and because I do want to get into the planet overview. So I'm currently a customer success manager at Planet. I started my role actually in July, and what's fascinating about this role is that it brings a lot of what I loved at my time at Develop. Like I love being in that middle ground, or like being that bridge between the technical teams and the stakeholders or clients, and like being able to like translate the needs and ensuring that so much the clients and the participants or project partners can get the most value of the data. And I was fortunate enough, like I said, to find that job at Planet. So I'm gonna give you a quick background of like the industry, current industry challenges within the remote sensing field, what's Planet missions, provide some use cases, and how Planet provides some of these solutions, and then kind of like the next phase of the project. And then that would give us enough time also to open up for discussions and have a very engaging Q&A. So normally when we're talking about remote sensing data, like there's a lot of challenges. You need to make timely business decisions, but you have like inaccurate data or the data is outdated. And so ultimately that, leads to like lack of insights or like inability to have a call to action appropriately, or, even more dangerously, making like uninformed decisions. So the traditional approaches are falling a little bit short, like looking at the limited coverage or the low revisits. Like I love Landsat, and it's very dear to my heart, and I use it for my PhD background, but like the revisit times are like, about every 2 weeks. So if there's a particular month that it was, particularly cloudy, and you mix one round, then all of a sudden like you have like a month of gap in that data. And then if you're studying areas in the tropics, there's a lot of a lot of cloud cover, a lot of rain, so it just makes it, that gap just keeps growing and growing. Same time, like, sometimes accessing that information can be a lot of hard work. So when you're looking at coverage in the span of a day or a week or a month, a plane can depart and from a location of interest, and ultimately, and the military can lose that situational awareness. When you're looking at like deforestation, satellite imagery is great for picking out like where deforestation took place. But, if you have more readily available imagery, you can try to be more proactive about it. Essentially, if an illegal road appears in the forest, 1,000-year-old trees are lost forever. So the trick is like, how can we use the satellite imagery to be more proactive? And one way is to, like, for example, identifying those logging roads. If you identify a logging road, you can prevent deforestation, because honestly, once the trees are cut, it's going to be hard to like find the parties involved, or like by the time you're trying to assess that, they've already moved on to a different location. Same time, like when you're looking at natural disasters, a community is devastated by a natural disaster, and a local government can lack the ability to deploy emergency responders effectively. So like I mentioned earlier, like I'm from Honduras, my parents still live there, so does my sister. We were like, Honduras was hit really bad by Hurricane Eta. And right now, like Hurricane Iota is on its way and starting to feel like the rain and the wind in those areas. And what's sad is that the ground is already saturated. So essentially, the situation in Honduras and Nicaragua is going to go from being bad to worse. And ultimately, like, those use cases that I mentioned, like remote sensing GIS data, can be applied to all these different kinds of industries, from civil government, insurance, finance and business intelligence, and agriculture, mapping, forestry, energy and infrastructure, and emergency management. The good news is like Planet is focused really on agile aerospace, trying to like make the data as easily accessible. And one way to do that is by leveraging cloud-based platforms. Essentially, we think that there's a better way, like insights at the speed of change, getting that data, that information as quickly as you need it. And that brings me to Planet's mission, which is to image the whole world every day, making change visible, accessible, and more importantly, actionable. So here we can see like some simple use cases in agriculture and forestry, being able to track land cover change. And as you mentioned before, like this, the near infrared, the brighter the red means normally like the more dense, or like the further along in the growth cycle that those particular crops are involved in. You can monitor, areas that need, of concern within the different growth cycles too, like so you can, like maximize your resources to minimize loss in efforts. At the same time, like if you're looking at forestry, you can estimate tree counts, measure tree stress, and if you look at some of the developed videos that I mentioned before, like you can even try to like identify infestations within certain trees. When it comes to defense and intelligence, situational awareness, you can monitor different assets, and more importantly, you can also look at border security. When it comes to energy and infrastructure, you can measure commodities, A lot of these tanks actually, the roof kind of like moves up and down based on how much of the product is inside. So that's one way you can like more or less estimate what are currently or like how much capacity a particular site might have. You can also monitor activities as like activities within well pads, so you can make sure things are properly permitted and properly regulated as well. In terms of infrastructure, you can look at, you know, how the development or progress on the building of an airport or a different infrastructure is taking place. So one thing that we know at Planet, one thing that we noticed that drives a lot of values is that high cadence, that global coverage, that efficient delivery, and access platform. So ultimately, like, you know, we want to facilitate that our clients exploring that imagery, gaining that insight, and a way to connect and build. Essentially, all of the solutions at Planet being divided into 4 different categories. Like there's Planet monitoring, which pretty much, you know, looking at how the land cover is changing. Planet base maps, and this is just like they can be with weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly, to just give you a good summary, cloud-free summary of your particular area site. Planet tasking, for those areas that you're particularly interested in, you want higher resolution imagery, you can task our satellites. And then there's the analytic feeds, which I'll cover in a little bit more details in just a bit. Currently, there's 2 active constellations. We had a 3rd, Rapid Eye, which was retired earlier this year. And we have a rich archive of 5-meter resolutions dating back to 2009. Our current constellations consist of the Dove satellites within what's PlanetScope. These are pretty much satellites the size of a loaf of bread that take imagery at like around just under 4-meter resolution, a spatial resolution, and we keep updating them on a regular basis. We always have 130 plus, just so we can ensure almost daily coverage of the entire world. And then we have SkySat, 21 SkySat satellites. We just launched 6 more this year to make it up to 2021. And just a word on that agile aerospace, you know, within 6 years of having Doves, we've kind of like reiterated like 14 times, like always improving the spectral bands and the other services and processing times of these satellites. Here, more or less what to look together, comparison. What's interesting too is that, like I said, PlanetScope is always on, always taking imagery. And normally we'd like to use these 2 satellites as a team. So when we have like the medium resolution at like under 4 meters with PlanetScope to help identify maybe like a key area. And from there we can task a higher resolution that's like around 50 centimeters to get more insight. And the advantage of our SkySat satellites is that they have like highly available revisit times. We're talking about like, you know, over 6 per day at least. In some cases, it can be up to 12. So, you know, when we monitor areas, we can create timely insights. We can have quick and easy access, and you can also customize more or less what sort of subscription models that fits the scopes and requirements of your industry. With the Planet tasking, it kind of creates like on-demand requests from satellites. The interface to request an image once your plan and account is set up is as easy as shopping in Amazon. You go to the page, you look to the tasking dashboard, you load your GeoJSON with your geographic coordinates, you give it more or less a time of like when you want that image collected, and you send it off. And just like if you're ordering something through Amazon, you can like track the progress of your of what's being taken, and also facilitates the canceling of the info as well. That way, there's like less time from like when you need a request and when you can submit it, and you can cut off the middle person, to that way it's not slowed down, and making sure that you get the data that you need. What's also fascinating is that like we're continuously working on reducing the time from when we capture the image and when it's quickly available. So like right now, we can guarantee like once an image is captured, you can have it within 10 hours. And we're working on trying to expedite that process. Like I mentioned before, base maps, the beauty about base maps is that we do the heavy lifting we can take all the PlanetScope data that we have for a particular area and pretty much create a seamless mosaic to eliminate the cloud work, to eliminate the cloud cover. That way you can get your particular area of interest with no cloud cover. And then jumping into Planet Feeds, the analytics, we've automated a lot of our PlanetScope imagery to like help identify vessels, aircrafts, and within the base maps, you can also extract automatically, well pads, roads, and buildings. The beauty about this is it's automated, it's recent, it's comprehensive, and we can deliver this to you either raster as a vector output. We are very friendly with APIs and web map tile services as well. Something I want to mention is that we have integrations with plugins that are freely available to use with ArcGIS Pro, QGIS, and we just recently released one for Google Earth Engine. So it's kind of interesting, having this imagery available. What would you do if you could see the daily change of blank, whatever your interest area is? And this brings me to kind of like the next phase of what Planet is trying to do. It's trying to create this queryable Earth, which is essentially make the Earth searchable the same way that Google makes the internet searchable. We have the imagery, long, extensive archive, a lot of data that we bring in. We're trying to make it so we can make this a quick way for you to do queries, because I know ultimately the imagery itself may not be the product of interest for some clients, but what's derived from it might be. So we're working on trying to make those extractions and those questions a lot less, well, I guess a lot seamless. That can be simply tracking building footprints, road developments, planes, trucks at a port, and ships, or even looking at forest cover or in particular areas. What's interesting about Planet is that it started off in 2010, kind of founded by a bunch of NASA scientists. Essentially, the premise was that time, the iPhone had come up. It was pretty common being around. They're like, hey, what if we take an iPhone, we go ahead and attach a telescope to it, and we send it off to space in a low Earth orbit. And essentially, that's how the company got started. And here we are, 10 years later with different constellations. If you have time, I highly recommend looking up at Will Marshall's TED Talks. Super informative, super motivating as well, and kind of goes to show what's the next wave in I guess this space renaissance that we're currently seeing so much within Planet, also with SpaceX, Blue Origin, and so on. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the space to talk to you. I encourage anybody who might have interests or questions or follow-ups, either about develop or even if you have some, want some career advice or inputs, or you're looking into grad schools, and don't hesitate to connect me. We can easily talk. I can see what your interest might be and try to identify who I know within that particular research that might be interested of you, and facilitate introductory emails. At the same time, you're looking for project ideas for develop. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Like I've said a couple of times already, the GIS remote sensing community is very collaborative, very engaged, and super welcoming. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll make the time to respond to your individual requests. You can find me through LinkedIn or shoot me an email. And one of the reasons why I also love to do this is, and I didn't mention earlier before, is that here I am ultimately starting my freshman year in Nicaragua, and I was able to meet this individual, Rich McWilliams, took me under his wing as a mentor, and I was able to get a scholarship and everything. And that chance encounter really changed my life. And I'm not saying that I can provide that for everybody, but if I can in at least some ways try to facilitate it, then I feel like I'm paying it forward. So with that, I would love to open I guess, a forum for Q&A.
If anybody would like to enter questions, please do so in the question box towards the bottom of your GoTo dashboard. Steve, we do have one question from Stephen Hodge. He says, for develop, can you just apply with the idea of joining a team as, say, the GIS person or the Python programmer?
Generally, like when you apply to develop, you apply it as a whole. You don't have to like specifically try to like meet a particular role. But obviously, if you know, that person already is thinking about like being that GIS or that programmer, I feel like you already have the skills needed to be you know, a very attractive candidate for the program. I should also mention, like, if you're looking at internship opportunities, like Planet does offer paid opportunities as well. So you could also reach out to me and I can try to get some more information. I do have to admit that I'm a little bit less familiar with the program itself, but it would be no trouble for me to learn more about it.
So Steve had a follow-up question and he says, so you don't have to bring your own project, right?
That is correct. You don't have to be your own project. For the most part, there's normally a delay from when a project is proposed and then when it's ready to, I guess, when it's been approved and, you know, like we develop interviews, teammates and stuff. So yeah, you definitely do not need to propose a project. And honestly, you don't necessarily have to have pick a project beforehand before you apply. That can be teased out within the application process to figure out where you could also be a good fit.
While we wait for some more questions, some minor housekeeping. I've added the link to our session matrix in the chat box, and everybody should be sure to go there and register for each individual session you plan on attending. I know this format is very different than what we've had in the past, and it takes a little bit more upkeep to get going, but please make sure to register in advance. Oh, we have some more questions that came in from Elizabeth Harrell. She says, from the National Resource Program and the GIS Lab at Thomas University, thank you for encouraging students to investigate this field and apply for internships. And then Dwayne Treeden says, have you worked using remote imagery with the small geographic areas like a city or a town? And what are the challenges working with a small area, if so?
Normally, the challenges with working in a small area oftentimes is, you know, like the resolution. You know, if, I guess to answer the first question is like, yes, we actually, at least with Planet, given the resolution of the imagery being like 5 meters, you know, like we can get a lot of visibility at individual crop fields. But cities themselves, actually, they're big enough to have and work with data. Some of the issues that might arise might be from like the time that the data is taken. Like there's a lot of like shadows that can happen that could result in some mixed classifications if that's what you're looking into. But ultimately, I think with the, you know, as we're increasing the resolution, spatial resolution on satellites, becoming easier and easier to work on smaller sites.
All right, so we've got Will Isaacs asks, which platform do you like to use more for imagery processing, ArcMap or ArcPro?
Oh man. Just because I like to use it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, but like, you know, so I was a GIS analyst and what was provided to us was, you know, ArcGIS desktop. So like I became very proficient, and by proficient meaning that like I was able to, you know, I was aware of like certain bugs and was able to manipulate the info. Also relied on Envy, but that is a very roundabout way to say like ultimately it's whatever's available to you and like how well you come to know that particular program. Like it's almost similar to like how some people say like, you know, honestly, if you're a photographer, the best camera you can have is the one that you use on a daily basis that you have with you, and oftentimes that can be as simple as an iPhone. So, you know, you can look at the pros and cons and as to like what programs might be better for some industries or others, but ultimately, I think it comes down to how proficient you become within a particular program, and that will allow you to take the most advantage of the tools available and the workarounds to be more proficient in handling that data. Because even if you get the best software and you're not sure how to use it, then essentially the software itself is, you know, going to waste, and you're not getting the input that you need.
We had a follow-up from Dwayne who asked about the small geographic areas. He asks if a drone could be used to gather data at a better resolution for a small area study analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, drones are great for small areas. Sometimes they can be a little bit labor intensive. So like sometimes instead of trying to deal it with like a either or question, sometimes I think it's also worth looking into exploring, you know, both of them, because drone can take a lot of like processing power, a lot of person power to capture those areas. So how can we take advantage of the high resolution of the drone imagery and reduce kind of like those high costs? So one way could be is like relying on that medium or high resolution satellite data to kind of like help pinpoint like where you want to maximize those efforts, or maybe use the medium and high resolution data to have an idea of what's going on in your particular area of interest, so you know exactly when it is that you want to go out there and collect that finer grain of data, just to make it a little bit more sustainable and cost effective.
All right, we have a new question. Would Planet extract features from a given area of interest and provide that data as a vector layer, such as roadways or road medians?
Definitely roadways. I would have to look into if mediums would be included in that as well. But anything that's got to do with roads, building footprints, or even like presence of other areas like airplanes, those are in vector form.
We don't have any more questions that have come in yet. Oh, we just have one more. They just keep popping in very slowly. Will the resolution of satellite imagery improve in the years ahead?
I believe so, and we're seeing it happen as well as it's happened. You know, when you look at like Landsat to Sentinel, you know, like I said, it's so fascinating when we look at, for example, Rapid Eye, which was like the size of a washer flying around collecting 5-meter resolutions, and now we're capable to create, you know, have the same spectral resolution, same spatial resolution, like under 5 meters, with something as small as you know, like a loaf of bread. So it's definitely happening, and I'm excited to see like what new technology advancements can happen to ensure that we continue that way. And I do have to say, like, that was even within a matter of like 5 years, or I guess within 10 years, when the first Rapid Eye was launched, and then when the first Dove was launched.
For this type of application, spectral resolution is perhaps more important than spatial resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then, are there any areas that Planet cannot provide imagery for, such as military bases, conflict zones, etc.?
So the when it comes to PlanetScope, the information is like collected, since it's more of a medium resolution. There are some restrictions or cautions that in certain areas that have to go through compliance for particular tasking. So it's not to say like we won't take it, but it's more along the lines of like certain areas might need to be reviewed, and more importantly, we also to meet that compliance, they also have to consider like who's requesting the information and for what purpose.
Unless we have any more questions pop in, On behalf of the SHRUG board, I would like to thank you for being our keynote this year. And I would also like to encourage everybody to attend all of our sessions over the next 2 days. Our next session does start at 10:45, so we have a little break before then. We've tried to work breaks in between every session, so there's very little Zoom fatigue or go-to fatigue. Oh, we have 2 more questions. Let's see. Does the advent of commercial spaceflight open the satellite imagery to more users?
Yes, yes, it does. Ultimately, because it creates an easier way, or actually, I would say, more options to create to allow satellites to be placed on in orbit. You know, if you look over here, actually, when we're looking at like what planet has used even within the last year, you know, everything from like the Indian Space Agency, to Rocket Lab to SpaceX. Just to name a few, like I think the more diverse it becomes, it benefits everybody because it just gives more options, and more importantly, it also helps bring costs down, allowing for ways to like maximize investment dollars.
Did you encounter any resistance from landowners during your study?
No, actually, I did not, and that could be in part due to I guess the Costa Rican culture. Like they're constantly, you know, labeled like the happiest country in the world and so on. And not to mention that, like normally when you're looking at, you know, issues around climate change or environmental management, it's not a politicized or even like a divisive topic to bring up. I'm not saying like that's the case for absolutely everybody, but for in general, it's they're normally very friendly, very open community, especially in the area that I was working in.
So what is the most interesting thing that you've seen in satellite imagery?
In terms of like what's been captured on the ground?
I think so.
I encourage everybody to like actually just Google like out of like the most amazing Google Earth images, and it's pretty fascinating some of the things you can find from like I want to say like fighter jets like that have been submerged in the water like off a coast, to like old remains of ruins in a crop field, to I want to say like even like 1 or 2 murder scenes as well. So it's fascinating what you can find out there, and I encourage you to like I said, use that that Google search phrase, and you'll find some fascinating imagery.
All right. Well, with that, I think our time has come to an end. Again, thank you so much for being our keynote this year, and for all attendees, we hope to see you at our next 10:45 session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.